Here we are. This is session 8 of 8 sessions that have gone on over this entire month, the month of February in 2024. Today is Saturday, the 24th of February, and it's session 8, in which we will apply the principles of dramatic structure and character development to Words from the Forest, a story that I've made up. So first, we will review again, and I know this will be boring for those of you who've attended past sessions, Ken, but try not to be bored. Try to find something new, even though you've heard it all before. Do I have a number of people as co-hosts who can let people in? Yeah, I'm going to make a few more. Because when I get carried away, I forget to press buttons, so I press the wrong buttons. Even worse. Okay, here we go into screen share. So, what do people say about dramatic structure? A lot of people talk about a hook, and this is really especially cinema people. There's a field called being a screenplay guru. In Hollywood, they've appropriated that guru word from India, and they have screenplay gurus who give workshops for screenplay writers. And so what follows is largely from the cinema theoretical people, but I submit that this applies to story in general, regardless of how the story is presented. So a hook is something that happens at the beginning that gets us hooked. It's often very emotional. It may be a flurry of action, but it's something. And we wonder, hey, why did this happen? What just happened? Why did it happen? What's going to happen next? So it grabs our attention and captures our imagination. And if it's a book, we can't put down the book because we identify with the characters and we want to know what's going on. What is at stake here? What is at risk? What are the characters hoping for? What are the characters afraid of? So we begin to get situated in the situation. An inciting incident is it might be the same thing as the hook, but an inciting incident is something that happens very early on where really gets the story in motion, because it's not something that can stand alone. There has to be a response to this kind of incident, or a follow-up, or the situation has to be fixed, or what has been exposed has to be fixed. So this sets up the whole rest of the experience. And the suspense is how is the inciting incident going to be fixed or developed or followed up on? We kind of expect something's going to happen already. Whenever something happens in story, in theater, whenever something happens, we expect something to happen next. There's pattern recognition, which we all internalize as babies, as we hear stories and as we live life. So when something happens, we have a feeling something else might happen, or we want something else to happen. So the suspense is, when is that going to happen? How is it going to happen? It might not happen the way we expect it to. So now along the way, there may be some character who has to explain what has happened in the past. See, if a story is presented in pure chronological order, exposition is not necessary. But if we're coming in the middle of the story, somehow we have to learn about what happened earlier. So that's exposition, and it's famous for being boring. So if you're if you're writing exposition, try not to make it boring. But that's easier said than done. In the Tempest, which we looked at a few sessions ago, the way it's done is the father explains to his daughter what has happened in the last 12 years that she didn't know about. And the audience just happens to be listening in. But that is a way to justify exposition without it being boring. Okay, the action is rising, the storm is gathering, the plot is thickening. I love that thickening plot. It's like when you're cooking, right? Certain sauces or certain things that you're cooking, it thickens, and you know, because the heat is making it thicken together with the thickening agents. But when a plot thickens, we all know what that means, right? Things are getting complicated, things are getting emotional, more and more is at stake, we care more and more. And then the whole thing is coming into focus, what this is all about, and really why we should care. There may be a problem that the main character wants to solve, and this is the biggest cliche in teaching creative writing around the world. The cliche idea is that the main character, I say main character instead of protagonist, that the main character wants something, and that's the spine of the story. And the rest of the story is going to be, do they get it or not? Or how, in what way do they get it? Or is there a problem that the main character wants to solve? These are the these are the things that people are looking for in a script. But you may not give it to them, but then they may say, I can't relate. If there's no problem, if the main character is not on a mission, your story doesn't fit into the mainstream. Okay, along the way, there are going to be setbacks, obstacles, or pinches, as some people call them. An antagonist or an antagonistic element stops the progress. An antagonist is not a villain, it's just something that opposes the progress of the main character going towards what they want to do. And so the main character has to marshal her resources and try to overcome the setbacks and the obstacles. So there are going to be twists and turns, ups and downs, joys and frustrations. There may come a point where the jig is up. All seems to be lost. The main character is crushed. Her plans are crushed. And it seems like it's the end of the story, but it's not, because she manages to be resilient and recover and heads on to the final confrontation with whatever she's confronting. And if it's a triumphant story, she triumphs. And then the falling action is how she and everyone around her responds to the fact that she triumphed. So what I've picked up in this study is that there's this idea that story is really about a character rising to the occasion and doing something that she never thought she would be able to do. She didn't think she had it in her, but circumstances demand it of her. Either demand that she does it or that she runs away and hides. And if it's a triumphant story, she doesn't run away. So her character undergoes a sort of transformation from in the beginning not kind of being unsure to going through a commitment and then a victory. So now character development. This is going to be more of the same. On one level, stories are, in general, it's ridiculous to make generalizations like this, but this is what theorists do. On one level, stories are about this psychological growth and transformation of a main character. You know, we can't say all stories are about this, but there seems to be largely a consensus in the critical world that this is what stories are for. This is what stories are about. The main character goes through a transformation where she becomes, she marshals her resources, she pulls herself together, she finds resources within herself that she didn't even know she had, and she manages to do what she set out to do. You might keep this term individuation in mind from Carl Jung. That's what he called when we become aware of the different parts of ourselves and coordinate the different parts of ourselves. So the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and we are a whole person, WHOLE. Even our shadowy parts, because we're aware, they're integrated, and we can really move forward as a strong integrated person. And part of this maturing process is also integrating oneself with the universe, in knowing where you fit in terms of society, ideology, what social movements you're a part of, what ideological movements you're a part of, what divine senses you have, if you have any, but all of this, how you fit into the universe. This is also part of maturing and transforming. Characters who are kind, generous, and humble tend to be helped by allies and helpers who appear. The famous fairy godmother helping Cinderella. So we expect that good characters, and we certainly hope that good, kind, humble, generous characters are going to get this help. And there's suspense about, will she get the help, or is she going to continue to get bad treatment? As I mentioned, the story may involve the main character at first being like a leaf being swept by the wind, but then at a certain point she crosses a threshold and she stabilizes, and she's committed to doing something. Some people make a distinction between wants and needs. Wants are, I want a particular thing, and that drives the plot. That's the spine of the story, as I mentioned. But what she needs is her emotional, psychological development and maturity, so that she can succeed in her mission. So needs involve this internal growth. And we want to keep an eye on how stories relate to the here and now, the social, cultural, political, environmental conditions, and keep in mind whether the story is inspiring us or giving us a warning not to do something. Okay, so much for abstract generalizations. Does anyone want to say anything about any of these? Hey, Jeff, it's just you and me. Yeah, Ken has gone for coffee. No, the coffee's on the table. Well, I don't know. Anyway, there are 21 people. Hey, Shrifty, thank you for joining. Even if you have your camera turned off, does anyone want to make any comment about anything I've just said? Do you believe it? You think it's worth a hill of beans or not? Anybody? Ken?
Yes, Eric, as always, this is a wonderful overview of story structure. And I think it's very interesting to me, being involved in film, that these standards, these observations apply to film as well as spoken story or written story. In film, though, in the last couple of decades, there's been a language that helps us explain exposition. So when you want to show what happened 12 years ago, you do a flashback, right? And you let your audience know that this is something that happened before the action that occurred at the beginning of the film. And one last thing I want to share about that is that for spoken storytellers, for people who are telling traditional or original spoken stories, if you use film techniques, if you juxtapose portions of your story, you can confuse your audience if they're not expecting it. You know, that has been my experience. So you've got to be careful. You have to understand what your audience is expecting. Anyway,
Sure.
thank you so much, Eric.
Sure. Uh, a flashback makes me think about a visual experience, but many times spoken stories, yeah, people will start in the middle. There's one story that the Grimm brothers collected, and on the day they collected it, the senior lady who told the story, it seems, decided to start in the middle. And so that's the version we have. This is the goose girl at the well. It starts in the middle where the senior lady is out gathering wood, and a young man helps her, and that young man ends up marrying the heroine of the story. But that story requires some exposition and some flashback, because that day that lady decided to start the story in the middle. On another day, she might have started the story at the beginning. So it's with storytelling, it's not written in stone whether you're going to start at the beginning or in the middle. Okay, so today's story is a screenplay that I've written, a story that I've made up, which I'm trying to bring to the small and big screen. Yes, I need an agent to pitch it to Apple Studios in California, because I believe Apple, I connect with Apple and I've used Apple equipment, and there's a computer in the movie, which is a star of the movie, which could be made by Apple, or actually it could be a tablet. So that's called what? Product placement in movie advertising, in effect. When a commercial object is an actor in a movie. So anyway, you all know you cannot approach Apple Studios yourself. You need an agent who gets 15% to do that. But it's not easy to get an agent. You have to be recommended by a biggity big in the business to even have an agent talk to you. So anyway, I'm telling you a secret now, ladies and gentlemen. My thousands of hours of effort of planning this Chennai Storytelling Festival 2024, in the back and front of my mind, my motivation has largely been to get this movie made. I'm a practitioner of magical thinking. To think that if we put on a great festival, maybe the granddaughter of Steven Spielberg will sit in and say, "Oh, my grandfather Steven Spielberg wants to make you a movie," or something like that. Anyway, let's proceed. Yesterday, was it yesterday we went over the epic of the ankle bracelet? I think so. The Tamil story where the characters end up in the forest after the city burns. And my movie takes up from there, because the Words from the Forest takes place in the forest. It's about 8 teenagers from New York City who come on well, let me start at the beginning. We zoom into Manhattan, over the Statue of Liberty, over the bay, and we see a school that says on the front door, "School for the Future." And we're in a classroom, and a teacher says, "All right, students, please be quiet. If you want, you can, if your parents can pay for it, you can go to India this summer on summer vacation for a 3-week visit with tribal people in the South Indian jungle. And if you want the form, please raise your hand." Many of the students raise their hands. It's 11th grade, so they're all 16 and 17. And to make a long story short, they come, 4 young men, 4 young women, and 2 teachers. One teacher is a fellow sort of like me, but 30 years younger. I can't play the part. He's the drama teacher. And then there's an Indian lady who moved to the USA, who's the biology teacher. So those 2 teachers bring the 4 young men and 4 young women, and they come to Chennai, then they go down to Madurai, then they go take a bus up into the mountains. And they meet They're being escorted by a PhD student from University of Madras who takes them to his fieldwork village to meet with these tribal people. So there's a lot of singing and dancing along the way because, of course, all of the teenagers, including some of the tribal teenagers, are having identity crises. And actually, I've realized that almost all of the USA teenagers have severe doubts about themselves. Just to run it off, well, one young woman is slightly autistic, so she's wondering, do I have enough of a mind to function and to live in society? You know, autistic people often know they're autistic. By the way, my wife keeps saying I'm autistic. I don't believe her, but she's pretty convinced. But okay, that was an aside. Then there's a Chinese American young man who has dreadlocks. That's kind of unusual, right? Chinese American young man with dreadlocks, and he loves rap. He does rap. He's a rapper, Chinese American. Then there's a young Iraqi boy, or his father's from Iraq, mother's just a USA white person. His father was a translator for the USA Army back in when the USA invaded Iraq 20 years ago. And so he's wondering, can I really be a USA person even though I'm half Arab and I'm raised as a Muslim? Can I really be you know, I don't say American because there's North and South America. Say, can I really be a USA person like this? Then there's a Native American young woman whose family lives in New York, and she's not sure she wants to be a USA citizen because you know, she's of a certain tribal nation, and she's angry about how tribal Native American people have been treated. So she's somewhat defiant. Then there's one young man who wants to be a playwright of all things. He's wondering, like, can I really make a living as a playwright or even as a screenwriter, screenplay writer? Can I make a living like that? Then there's a young woman who's the techie of the bunch, and she runs the computer for the bunch. And you know, some people make some snide remarks about, you know, is it feminine to be a techie? And she doesn't care. She just does her tech work. So each one of them has their own thing going, and the tribal people who they're visiting. There's one young tribal man who says, I can't stand tribal culture. I don't want to have anything to do with it. He stays inside all day and edits the soundtracks from movies coming from Chennai, because he makes the soundtracks. There's a dance group in the village that dances to Tamil cinema music. And because this tribal group, they live near a main road on the edge of a forest. They don't live in the forest, you know? So they have cable TV, they have FM radio, and they have a dance group that dances to Tamil cinema music, which is largely rock and roll and hip hop. They do breakdance. So the young man who edits the tapes, the recordings, he doesn't even like to go outside. He just likes to stay inside and listen to electronic music coming from Chennai. And the Chinese American rapper, at one point he visits with him, and here's the Tamil young man, the tribal young man saying, I can't stand this place. I can't stand my heritage. The Chinese young man says, well, you know, I used to feel that way myself, but I found some things in my heritage, in Zen Buddhism and Taoism, that I can use in my rap. So I'm mixing it up. I found that if I mix it, I can fix it. So he goes into a rap for the tribal young man based on let's mix it to fix it. So that's one song number. There's one young woman in the USA group who loves modern dance. which is sort of an old-fashioned thing now. I mean, it was revolutionary in its time. Martha Graham developed it in the 1930s. It involved breathing out to contract, breathing in to get big, and a lot of stretching and twisting and bending, all based on your breathing. It's still a basic form in dance, but somehow this teenager came under the influence of a dedicated modern dance dancer and teacher. And this young woman is dedicated. She loves modern dance, and she explains it to the tribal young woman who leads the dance group. And there's a number where the members of the dance group try it out. This breathing out, breathing in, stretching, contracting, and that's my favorite dance number of the whole piece. You see, many of the young tribal people know English because they went to a Christian school, a Catholic school nearby. So that takes care of the language problem. The senior tribal people don't speak English. So when we talk to them, the few times that they speak, there have to be some kind of subtitles. Or you see, when the team was in Chennai, a technology company loaned to them a special tablet computer, which has a number of unique qualities. It's just loaned for this educational visit. One is that it has a universal translator in it. So somebody can speak in any language, including a tribal dialect, and it'll come on the screen in English or any other language, or it will come by audio in any language. So that is used. That is used especially in one scene. One of the young people from the USA, a biological young man who feels he's a woman. He hasn't had any surgery. He hasn't had any puberty blockers, but at the age of 16, they really feel like a woman. But of course, that person is afraid of being ridiculed and afraid of being rejected. And that young person goes walking in the forest and looking at the trees and the vines, all the different vegetation. You know, there's such variety in a forest. And so that young person sings a song about how there's so much variety in nature. Why can't variety be accepted in humans also? But ends up just feeling, oh no, it's not going to work. I'm not going to be accepted. And just sits down and weeps a bit. But a senior tribal lady, the senior lady in the tribe, walks by. She's been collecting, wild vegetables, and she sees that this young person is in distress. So she, signals what's the matter. So the young person explains the situation, and the tablet computer does the translation and gives her the spoken message in the tribal dialect, because she doesn't read any language. So she understands because the tablet computer gave her the message, and she says back, listen, we don't care if you're a boy or a girl, we love you. And she says that in the tribal dialect, but it comes onto the tablet and comes onto the screen, and the young person reads it, and there's some tears all around. So that's so it's going like that. You see, it's teenagers having their things and having their songs and having their struggles. But then one night they do a video conference back to their school in New York. And they set up a sheet hanging from two poles on the side of a mountain, and hang a sheet there. And the tablet computer has a built-in projector. That's another unique thing. Also, it can run by solar power and crank power. So they do a video call back to their administration in New York with tribal people with them. And they get the news. The administrator in New York says, listen, we're in the middle of a global health crisis. In the last 2 days, millions of people around the world have fallen into coma. And it's the type of coma that another 2 days, they're going to have permanent brain damage. So the teachers in the forest there, they say, well, what should we do? Should we come back? And the administrator in New York says, you can't come back. All commercial flights have been grounded because even the pilots were passing out. So and the man in New York asks them, are you having are people going into coma there in the forest? No. So it seems the forest is the safest place. So the senior tribal lady says, I think I know what can help those people. A certain plant perhaps could help them. But I want to guarantee that all around the world, tribal people are going to be permitted to keep living in the forest, and also no more trees are going to be cut in forests around the world. The administrator in New York says, "Madam, I'm just a school administrator. I can't promise these things. I'm not in a position." So they hang up, but somebody calls CNN. And next thing you know, somebody also calls the United Nations. And the next night, they have another conference where they're patched into CNN Global News. But before we get there, I have to tell you one pinch, one all is lost moment, which is that on the day after that first video conference, there's an elephant stampede through the village because some people on a nearby estate were burning down the forest to make their estate bigger, and elephants stampeded. They came through the village and they knocked the tablet computer off a table and stepped on it. An elephant stepped on the tablet computer and smashed it to smithereens. So then it seemed that they're not going to, all is lost. They're not going to be able to give any kind of message to anybody. But a TV crew shows up. The TV crew saw the photo of the presentation of this tablet computer to the team in Chennai a week or two before, and the TV crew has a transmitter, but they don't have satellite access. Luckily, the techie young woman had backed up the satellite coordinates from the tablet computer. So she saves the day with that one. So that night they connect again, and this time the head of the United Nations is on the line, and he says, "Madam, to the best of my ability and power, I tell you, no tribal people are going to be evicted. Please tell us what to do." And she says, "You've got to take a certain flour that grows in many places and grind it in a certain way, mix it in a certain way, put it on people's bodies, and even make tea out of it, and have them drink the tea, and also sing a certain mantram to them." Usually mantrams are kept very secret, but in this case, she tells it. She teaches it. And also you need to massage the people in a certain way. And she shows how to do that. And those three things, the plant, the massage, and the song, they try it around the world, and it seems to work. Some people come out of their comas, and it works. It works. Many people come out of their comas. So traditional knowledge has saved the day together with the high technology. A couple days later, the team goes back to, the USC team goes back to Chennai and participates in a global Zoom video dance party where people are dancing together with electronic colors all over, and it's a big video art global party celebrating that collaboration between the traditional knowledge and the high technology. Okay, so that's the movie. The tribal lady believes that her knowledge about this flower comes from Agasthyar, who is a famous, perhaps real, perhaps mythical Hindu holy person, who the legend is he taught the tribal people about medicinal herbs. One legend is that he also taught them the Tamil language. There are lots of legends. But another possibility is that these tribal people who lived in these mountains for at least 70,000 years, probably coming from Africa, it's the senior tribal women who really know about the medicinal plants. This is what I saw. I did my PhD fieldwork with a tribe here. Although I made up this story before I did my fieldwork. But I saw that it's mostly senior tribal women who know about medicinal plants, who work with them and nurse the young, nurse the old. But they can't believe that senior tribal women, very dark-skinned women, could have developed this knowledge. It's much more easy for them to believe that it was brought to them by a Sanskrit culture, upper caste saint. So anyway, that's some cultural politics involved. But do you see why I say that this story begins where the Epic of the Anklet left off? The Epic of the Anklet, after the main character Kannagi goes through her nightmare in Madurai and requests the god of fire to burn the city to purify it, then she wanders off into the jungle and starts a new village based on love and justice, which she didn't get in her real life. So I feel that story, the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet, it can be read as a legend or folktale. It may be historically true or not, we don't know. But it can be read as a legend or folktale of warning against the patriarchy. Okay, you've come, you've conquered, you've taken over the cities. But if your reign has no love and no justice, the god of fire is going to burn you down. And the survivors are going to go off into the forest and start again. So our 8 teenagers from the USA, in effect, in my dream, they are refugees from civilization who've come. And now I'd like to ask you all a question, just to get you identifying and in the mood. What are your associations with the forest? What are your experiences in the forest? Are you like me? Do you love to go to a forest? Do you dream of going to a forest? Just take a minute or two to write about your experiences in a forest, or your dreams about a forest, what you'd like to do in a forest, what a forest means to you. Have you had adventures? Have you had any dangers? Have you had any wonderful experiences? What are your associations with forest? Okay, just take a couple minutes. You people with your cameras off, I hope you're also participating in this. What does a forest mean to you? In ancient Tamil culture, there were 5 cultural zones, ecological cultural zones. The seashore, pasture land, agricultural land, kind of barren land, and then the mountain forests. And each location corresponded to a stage in the relationship between a couple. At the seashore, they were apart. Perhaps he'd gone on a sea voyage and his wife was anxious, hoping that he'll come back. And each step along the way is a different step in their relationship. But in the forest, in the mountains, it's their ecstatic, blissful union. That was the place, that was the association of forest in traditional Tamil culture. A place of fertility, new life, love, togetherness, reunification. that's not a universal. That's very particular to Tamil culture. In the pan-Indian culture, a forest is a place where older people go to, ascetics go to give up material things and prepare to leave this life. That's a different view of forest. All right, would anyone like to share your association with forest, your dream forest, either verbally or here, I'll look in the chat section. Yes, there are rigors of living in a forest. There are mosquitoes, there are snakes. It's not easy necessarily. A forest may be scary, maybe eerie. Mm-hmm.
However,
Huh?
one could also make those exact same arguments for the city. The city is scary. Cities are eerie.
Yeah,
Scary cities have their own mosquitoes.
yeah.
Cities have rats that you may not find in the forest.
Mm-hmm. And
I
then,
find the forest to be a peaceful, calm place that one goes to renew their soul.
yes, the cities have rats and the rat race.
Well, and not all the rats are four-legged.
The tribal people I did my field work with, the Kani people in the very southern end of the Western Ghats. If you want to visit them, you take a train or bus to Nagercoil, and then you take a bus about 90 minutes northward, and you're up there in the mountains. They took me on a walk one time to a place along the river, and they said, "Oh, yeah, this is the place where the people came when there was a drought." It seems when there was a drought in the plains, people from the plains came up into the mountains, especially around this place and this river, and survived because of the moisture and the vegetation and the wild plants and all. So a forest is a place of refuge when things dry out on the plains. Ken?
My experience in a forest was with a group of other students. We were older than teenagers. We were in our early 20s, but we all had to acclimate to the ruggedness of these. They were wilderness areas in a string of islands in Lake Superior, north of Indiana and Wisconsin in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So the time it takes to get yourself physically adjusted to the various things that you've already mentioned, and then be able to walk. We had to walk at least 2 miles or so to our work site every day. We were archaeology students.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, it didn't take as much effort. And then we had already had conversations that we might have had on a long walk, and then everybody got quiet. And what stands out for me in a forest is it's quiet. It's typically clean. And when it's a wilderness area, it's untouched. And so we were able to feel that the reverence of being noisy human beings inside a very quiet place. And all of the other animals knew much more about the forest than we did.
Mm.
And we were finding physical remains of Native Americans, First Nation peoples,
Mm-hmm.
who used all those resources, the different kinds of trees, the different kinds of herbs. You know, we were guests in their environment too. Something I want to say kind of early on with your story, Eric,
Mm.
you've got lots of things. You've got an ensemble group, you've got music, you've got dance, you've got global events. I think your group of 8 plus the local native people, we need to perhaps focus on a smaller subgroup that we really grow to care about. If we don't care about the group, if we don't
Mhm,
care about an individual or two,
mhm.
then you kind of go, well, why am I watching this? You
Sure.
know, why should I care? Now, to give you an example, in my wilderness experience, we had an artist join us late in the summer to help document the artifacts. But she had come there, like many other young women who suffered from cancer. She had come there to die. She was planning to kill herself.
Hmm.
And in the time that we all spent together, she became part of our team, part of our group. We played volleyball after work and, you know, just let her become one of our group. And then by the end of the summer, her thoughts of ending her life were completely gone. She kind of regained her will to live.
Mhm.
And it may be, let's say, your gender identity teen. There's a high suicide rate with people who are feeling like they need to be something else but are not allowed to by society. That's a person who is endangered. That is a person who might go with the rest of the group to India thinking, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to die. And they give her back her faith in living. And then they aren't all those different ethnic groups. They all are part of her new family, right? Who
Yes,
accept her for who she is.
yes.
And then that is kind of the model for what happens to the rest of the world. I think you may have a lot more going on that will fit into a typical 2 hour movie, but
Yeah, the transgendered person, that's a very dramatic situation, but each one of them is not sure if they can fit in. You know, the techie woman, she laughs it off, but you know, it's an issue. Can she really be an attractive female and love to be an audio
right.
video techie?
Well, you've got a
The Iraqi young man, really, are people going to accept that he's Muslim? I mean, he hasn't really decided yet if he's Muslim or not, but he's raised as a Muslim. He thinks people look at him funny because he looks like an Arab and he's from a Muslim family. The
yeah.
the Chinese American young man, he's getting a lot of grief from his family because they don't want a rapper and a Chinese American son. They want a doctor, and they don't like his dreadlocks. So almost every one of them has a situation going, whether it's their race, their religion, their mind, their gender, their culture, where they're not really, or their profession, they're not really sure if they're going to make it. Or
Well,
hmm,
you've got the Breakfast Club in India,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
right? Ensemble, a little bit of dance, a little bit of music, right? The group all have issues, all of them, each one of them, but they
And
have to pull together. They have
yes,
to
of
pull
course.
together to
Well,
get through it. One big difference.
I have the screenplay, and I need a knockout director to work on this. But
Well, one big difference is Breakfast Club, they are there against their will. Your kids are going to India because they want to. Now, if all those kids who have these inner uh, conflicts, if they act out and they are then told they must do community service, but they're given the choice to go to a place like India, kind of like
it's
young
possible.
Peace Corps.
But the story of this movie is that they begin each one self-obsessed with their own struggles and their own uncertainty, but they pull together as a team and help save the world. That's the story of this movie. All
You know,
right.
and the
Huh?
threat, the threat
I
to the
think,
village.
Jeff, go
Sorry,
ahead. Yeah.
well,
Or
I think
village
Ken has a
and the
point.
environment, that needs to come in earlier. That needs to be part of the purpose of going to India, is to help help defend this foresty area. Now, I'll
No, they
stop.
don't.
Sorry.
Well, for the Native American woman, that's what she cares about 24
Well,
hours. But the others
that's
don't know about, they don't care about that. It comes up along the way.
well,
Jeff,
that's kind of my question is why is this group in India? Why did they go?
well,
Because
the teacher
from the sounds of it, they're so self-absorbed.
yeah,
Why'd they even
yeah.
go on the trip
Well,
to
the
India?
teacher who hands out the forms in the classroom at the beginning says, okay, this is something for your summer vacation if you want. Go ahead. You might learn something about India. You might learn something about nature. You might learn something about yourself.
The people you're describing don't sound like the type of people that's going to be the hook to pull them in. That's the thing. It just they don't sound like a group of people that are going to go to India unless there's a overriding force pushing them toward it. Now, for me, those would all be excellent reasons to jump on and go, but I can't see the way you're describing these people. They sound like the type that would do that.
All right. Another element in the plot is that the Indian woman biology teacher who's co-leading the group is, she's Indian, so she feels she's really the natural leader of this whole expedition. But she's of course upper class. She's from an upper caste, and she's vegetarian. And her India is very, very different from tribal India. So she's in the middle of realizing that there are many Indias, and she's a foreigner in a sense to the tribal culture and lifestyle and eating habits. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, I just want to say again that this 5 ecological cultural zones in classical Tamil culture, up until today, it's still a kind of a known fact that there are 5 cultural zones. And the rhythm of life in Tamil Nadu is you start on the coast and you end in the mountains. Maybe it's true everywhere, but especially there's different poetry, there's a different flower, there's a different time of day for each of these 5 ecological cultural zones. So, and I say different stages in the relationship in a couple. So,
I
so
think your
it's-
teenagers in New York, they should all be dancers. And their motivation to go to India is they're going to learn Tamil dance.
well,
It's a project.
right.
And then they're going to bring it back to New York.
As a matter of fact, that movie was made about 40 years ago. It was called Fame, where
Yeah.
students from a performing arts high school had adventures together. But in my high school, the students are not just in performing arts; they're in all different fields. But I am very much inspired by Fame because
Well,
my mother, just listen to this. My
Yeah.
mother was head of the dance department at Performing Arts High School when Alan Parker made Fame. And my mother was a consultant on Fame, and the main chair lady of the dance department in the movie was named Lydia, after my mother. And in the movie, she was played by Debbie Allen, a great African-American actress and dancer. But my mother was just a little old white lady. But in the movie, she became a very attractive younger African-American lady. So that's Hollywood for you.
Eric, your destiny is already laid out. You see, you've got the roots.
I need an agent.
Yes, you do. But I agree with Jeff that you need a better reason for these kids to want to go to
We
India.
can work out the details. Get me Apple Studios. Get them on the phone.
Got to go with a better script before you say,
Yeah.
here, I've got an apple.
All right, all right. Ken, really, are you in the commercial cinema world? I mean, do you know agents?
I can't say I know the agents that you would need for a film. No. I did documentary work here in Indianapolis,
Uh-huh.
and I'm a big film buff, and I use a film mind when I write stories, but I don't have connections to agents.
Well, to give you another element of my magical thinking, I believe this movie is inspired by movies here in South India, which for the past, since movies began, the Dravidian movement, which is the social movement of the South Indian people, has used stories and especially through movies to make their political points. And there's a session tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. India time, where it's going to be a discussion about how the Dravidian movement has used stories to communicate its messages. And the main messages are, the Dravidian movement is for the downtrodden, for the excluded, for the lower caste, for women. And so my movie is, it's championing tribal people and trees and traditional knowledge. So I'm pitching this movie to the local indigenous people party here in South India. And they have a big movie business going. So to learn more about that, please tune in tomorrow at 7:30.
But isn't that true of a lot of the movie industry?
In what sense?
Well, a lot of movies that come out of Hollywood, that come out of England, that come a lot of independent movies. That's their whole purpose, is to make political statement, make political changes.
Yeah,
I think that's true across cinema in general, not just there.
okay.
I just rewatched To Kill a Mockingbird and Inherit the Wind, which were made in the 40s, that are still, in the situation the United States is in at the moment, are as pertinent today as they were when they were made. So I think that's true not just in India, but that's true to a degree across movies everywhere.
I agree. But the way it has played out in particular here in Tamil Nadu is that there was something called the Justice Party, and then the DMK and the ADMK. It's a cultural movement to promote ancient Tamil culture, which has used some traditional stories and some new stories, like no other state in India. And the leaders of this movement have been cinema writers of the Dravidian movement. So it is a cultural movement that I feel the world should know more about, and applies not just to the Dravidian people, but to justice-seeking people everywhere. So anyway, one of my magical thoughts is that this political party and social movement is going to help make this movie.
You need an elevator speech.
Okay, okay.
You want to hear an elevator speech for your movie from me?
Yes, please.
8 young people from New York City, from different ethnic groups, receive a grant to go to another part of the world and learn their native dance. These people have conflicting elements in their lives. They are teenagers. Of course they do. They go to India. They learn Tamil dancing, and in the process, they help each other, and each one of them experiences a certain amount of healing. In the process, they learn about the local environment, which contains plants that are endangered and are going to be wiped out. The kids work together with the local Tamil teens and create a dance program that talks about the power of the local fauna, or the flora rather, right? And they present this in an international dance forum, and the message gets across, that they saved the forest, they have saved each other, and they come back from this adventure. They do this remotely using Apple products, but they come back and they are rejuvenated. They feel like they know who they are becoming now, and it would not have happened had they not gone to India together.
I love it. I love it. And I'm interested in the dance focus, but the thing is that the main dance that in my experience and in my script that the tribal people are doing is Tamil cinema dance, which is as I say, it goes with kind of rock and roll music and break dance. It's not traditional dance. The tribal people do have their own traditional dance, which involves a good deal of stomping and typically ends in a shamanic experience with people going into what we would
Okay.
call spirit possession.
So the teens from the United States look at the current Tamil dancing and they go, wait a minute, this is all stuff we already know. What about the older stuff?
Yeah.
And their curiosity about the more traditional, older forms of dance gets the local Tamil kids to re-recognize where they've come from, their ancestry, right? So the two groups of teens learn about the more traditional forms together.
Yeah, yeah. The Tamil and Indian cinema dance in general, they're taking elements from Indian classical dance and a lot of influence from Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson really hit it in the 1980s and influenced Indian cinema dance a lot. But I hear what you're saying. I'll think about it. Okay.
So the global crisis is almost too much. This is really more about individuals healing and rediscovering who they are and where they've come from.
Right. Okay.
And that's a message that teenagers need.
I kind of tend to agree with Ken. And when I was in college, we did a trip to India.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
I kind of did your movie.
Okay.
Now, I went through the School of Religion, and we were visiting largely religious shrines all over India. But it was kind of a very similar thing. We were a very mixed group. We were there for a reason. We were there to visit the religious shrines, but we spent the entire summer in India, and it was a absolutely magical experience.
Wonderful. Well, I did this movie too as a folklore student,
Yeah.
collecting fairy tales and then children's songs and games. But in my fantasy version, it's 8 teenagers and they find the flower and they save a lot of people.
Well, Eric, I think that as you told the story, I was thinking that this is a really amazing version of your story. And I actually think that your story is incredible and that you don't have to save the world from, people with having dying of a coma epidemic, that we can save the world in different ways, and you save the world through stories. And so I think your story may be embellished a bit, but it doesn't even have to be embellished. Your story is an incredible story, and that would make an awesome film.
Well, I'm ready. It's a bioepic, right? I'll give approval.
Yeah, it's your memoir. Yeah, it's a stunning story. What you've done, what you've achieved, where you came from. Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to come too far actually, because my parents, it took me more than halfway. My mother was a modern dance pioneer in the 1930s, and then she became editor of Dance Magazine and head of the dance department at Performing Arts High School. And my father was a playwright who didn't get produced, but who taught me about theater and wrote about theater and cinema for 42 years for 17 magazine, which is a national magazine in the USA. So they gave me, and New York City gave me, a tremendous cultural upbringing, which set me on my path.
It's a wild story, Eric. And then how you end up in India, studying the folklore of Dravidian tribal people.
Well,
And then,
I'm searching, I came here to team up with the goddess culture and help reform the global patriarchy.
well, but that's an incredible goal, and what a journey. I think it's a wild, wild story.
An Indian woman married me and she laughs at me when I tell that story.
It's just incredible. I mean, who could make that up?
She says, yeah, you're just a typical man.
But you're not.
Well, I'll ask my wife to listen to this recording.
Okay.
Anybody else?
that-
Any final thoughts?
That also would kind of depend on your definition of a typical man.
Well, you know what we mean. A typical man.
But keep in mind,
a typical man is
my ancestry is Celtic,
No,
and
no.
Celtic
but-
men don't dominate Celtic women.
Yeah, well, that's not typical. What is meant by a typical man is self-centered and irresponsible. That's what the women mean when they say that. Yeah, Karen, hello.
Hey, I've enjoyed listening. I was off camera. I'm in LA, so it's early in the morning. So
Okay, thank
so I'm
you.
finally awake here. So what I would like to echo what Louise said, and I think that a documentary about you could absolutely be made. I happen to live in Los Angeles. I live 10 minutes from Hollywood. So documentary films are being made here all the time. And I think that if you were to also pitch your story to the film schools at USC or UCLA, which are two of the especially USC is the largest, most prestigious film school in the world. It's 20 minutes from my house. But if you were to pitch a documentary film about you, I think that could absolutely be made, because hearing you tell the story, I like the script that you wrote, but honestly, the story of you for me is way more interesting. Just what you said about your parents, about your mom, about your dad, about how you ended up in India and an Indian woman married you, and how you want to change the patriarchy, and all these kind of things could absolutely be an incredible documentary. And I think that starting it, perhaps as a student film to get it launched in one of these places would be really a way of launching it. And I also think that, looking into documentary film companies here in Los Angeles is definitely, something that's totally doable and possible.
Well,
Because I can
please
tell
give
you that every other person that comes to LA is trying to pitch a script. And I've lived in LA now for almost 35 years. I've only known maybe 2 people who have ever actually gotten a movie made, because it is extremely difficult finding an agent. You already have to make a movie, like have a student film made or something, to even get an agent. So just getting the agent and shopping it. I mean, it's like, this is what I hear all the time. People are saying to me, oh, I wrote a movie script, and our response is, yeah. But a documentary, on the other hand, just a couple weeks ago, I was taking a neighborhood and I met a guy who's he's a cinematographer for documentary films, and he told me about the movie that he made, and it was amazing. It was an amazing movie. I looked it up, and there's so many great documentaries being made, but you're the subject of a documentary. The fact that you have made this storytelling festival all these years single-handedly, brought thousands of people together from around the world, started a movement. That's you. That's your story. Amen. Okay.
Thank you. Don't tell anyone I do it all by myself. I like to have the illusion that I have some office help, even though I don't.
Well, but I have to agree with what she said. And personally, I'm thinking that what you have done with the Chennai Storytelling Festival when the pandemic hit is way more powerful than them finding a plant in the forest that cures a coma.
I agree.
You
Yes.
provided a valuable service for basically the entire world. I tend to agree. I think your story is way more powerful
Thank you.
than
Yeah,
I would rewrite my story to be your story.
Thank you.
And
I've
I'd
loved
like
it.
I
I've
put
loved-
in,
Yeah, go
Eric,
ahead.
I just say that from what I've learned, we tend to downplay our gifts. And even though I hear you downplaying your gifts and your contributions, you've gone so far with bringing your gifts. I don't think you appreciate them as the value that they bring. And even though you do downplay them, you bring them, and that is what will save our world, is everybody bringing their gifts. And most people do not bring their gifts. You bring your gifts,
Thank
and
you.
that's really important. And your gifts have changed my life.
Thank you. See, I fell in love with video conferencing in the 90s, the mid 90s, when it was just developing. But then when the pandemic hit, 25 years later, I was ready. And so the first 8 editions of the Chennai Festival were 98% on the ground with just a couple of video conference events. But come March 2020, I went into action. I organized a 24-hour extravaganza in May 2020, and now the last 4 Februaries. So even though this is the 12th edition of the festival, it's only the 4th online version, but it seems it's made an impact.
Well, I was
All right.
part of your first 24-hour festival. I just stumbled upon you. I had no idea who you were. I just was reading a newsletter. We were in lockdown. I stumbled upon your festival. I think I listened to 20 of the 24 hours. I didn't even know there was a huge storytelling movement in India. And I was here with my family, and I was so inspired that I actually, while I was listening to the festival, I looked online and I learned how to make a whole bunch of Indian food, and I made an Indian food feast for my family. I learned how to make raita and chutney. I made naan from scratch. All this while listening to your festival. It totally opened my mind to storytelling in a way that I didn't even know existed. I had never even heard of this before. And it was like I was in India. I've never been to India, although my sister's in India right now, but I'd never been to India. And so that is how many people feel. And I think if a documentary were made about you, all of us could be the testimonials about what you have done for everyone.
Well, you know my phone number, or my my email ID. Please, I will cooperate with anyone who wants to make this
Well-
documentary. And if you have any suggestions, actually, how I could contact people at USC, okay. But
I'll look into
You
it.
might
yeah,
might look into PBS too
okay.
as a starting point. I mean, you can branch off from there, but this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of story PBS networks look for.
Okay. I really haven't thought in terms of this. It's hard enough for me to get a newspaper article about me. I got a lot of newspaper coverage here in India up until the pandemic. But since then, nothing, because local newspapers can't really publicize things that happen by Zoom. Okay, any other additional thoughts before we close this session? Karen, I hope your online schooling project is going well. Good.
Yeah, it's going okay. Yeah. Yeah,
Great.
mainly in person now. Our online stuff is hasn't been so great since things have reopened, but we're in person.
Great.
So we're back.
My and Magdalene's daughter is now in the 11th grade in a boarding school in Bangalore, and we're
Wow.
searching for a good summer experience for her. She's interested in psychology. So
Wow.
we're thinking about that. All right. Shall we sign off? Try to come tomorrow, 7:30 India time, for this discussion about the Dravidian movement and use of stories in their movies and dramas. Okay, or watch the recording. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you to the people who have their cameras turned off too.
Thank you,
Okay.
Eric.
Hey, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Jeff.